My name is Alexandra Sterling. I'm 41 years old, and I never thought my own sister would humiliate me in front of her wealthy friends by claiming I can barely afford groceries. But when my assistant called to tell me my billionaire status had just gone public, their pity party turned into the shock of their lives. The complete story. Let me start from the beginning. Because what happened at my sister's charity luncheon was the culmination of 15 years of carefully constructed deception that I had maintained to protect the most successful business empire anyone in my family could have imagined. I'm Alexandra Sterling, and for the past 15 years, I've been living the greatest undercover operation in corporate history. To my family, I'm the struggling single mother who threw away her MBA to become a freelance consultant, barely scraping by in a modest apartment while raising my teenage daughter Emma alone. The truth is infinitely more complex and dramatically more successful. What my family doesn't know is that I'm the founder and CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a private equity and technology investment firm that I built from nothing into a multi-billion-dollar empire. The company operates under such strict privacy protocols that my name appears nowhere in public records. I've spent 15 years acquiring companies, revolutionizing industries, and generating returns that would make Wall Street legends weep with envy, all while maintaining the fiction that I'm a financially struggling single mom. My cover story was perfect. Alexandra Sterling, the idealistic MBA who chose work-life balance over corporate success, taking on small consulting projects that barely paid the bills while prioritizing time with her daughter. I rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and shopped at discount stores, all while my actual net worth approached $2 billion. The deception was necessary for multiple reasons. First, the level of privacy required for my type of high-stakes investing demanded complete anonymity. Second, I wanted Emma to grow up with normal values, not the entitled attitude that comes with knowing you're a billionaire's daughter. And third, I was conducting the ultimate experiment in family loyalty, discovering who would love and support me when they thought I had nothing to offer. The results of that experiment were both heartbreaking and illuminating. My sister Victoria had always been the family golden child. She married a successful orthopedic surgeon, lived in a mansion in the most exclusive suburb, and spent her days organizing charity events for causes that made her feel important. She drove a Mercedes, carried designer handbags, and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone how blessed she was. Meanwhile, I was the family charity case, the sister who had wasted her potential and needed constant financial and emotional support. Victoria took great pride in her role as my benefactor, frequently offering to help me get back on my feet or introduce me to people who could give me a real job. For 15 years, I endured her patronizing concern and condescending offers of assistance. She would slip me gift cards for groceries, offer to pay for Emma's school supplies, and constantly suggest that I should get serious about my career and find stable employment with benefits. The irony was exquisite. While Victoria organized $1,000-a-plate charity dinners to feel philanthropic, I was quietly donating tens of millions to causes that actually mattered: children's hospitals, educational programs, disaster relief, all through anonymous foundations that couldn't be traced back to me. But the cruelest part was watching how she treated Emma. Victoria's own children attended elite private schools and had every advantage money could buy, while she pitted my daughter for having to attend public school and wear clothes from Target instead of designer boutiques. "It's so sad that Emma has to live like this," Victoria would say with fake concern. Such a bright girl, but limited by her mother's choices. Last month, Victoria invited me to her annual charity luncheon, an event where the wealthy wives of doctors and business executives gathered to pat themselves on the back for their charitable contributions while gossiping about people less fortunate than themselves. "Alexandra, darling," she said when she called, "I know the $100 ticket is probably a stretch for you, but I've already paid for your seat. I want you there to see how people with real means make a difference in the world." The condescension was breathtaking, but it was exactly the kind of event where I could observe the true character of people who thought they were better than me. The luncheon was held at the country club where Victoria and her husband were members. the same country club that had probably never seen a billionaire CEO dining in their main restaurant, though they'd certainly never recognized one dressed like a struggling single mother. I arrived wearing exactly what Victoria expected, a simple dress from Target, basic shoes, and the slightly uncomfortable expression of someone who clearly didn't belong among such wealth and sophistication. The event was everything I had anticipated: crystal chandeliers, elaborate floral arrangements, and enough diamonds to fund a small country's defense budget. Women in designer gowns air-kissed each other while discussing their latest charitable contributions and vacation destinations. Victoria immediately swept me into her circle of friends, introducing me with the patronizing tone she reserved for her pet charity cases. "Everyone, this is my sister Alexandra," she announced to a group of 5 women dripping in jewelry and judgment. "She's the one I've told you about, the single mother trying to make it as a freelance consultant." The pitying smiles were immediate and familiar. "Oh, you poor dear," said Margaret Whitmore, the wife of a prominent cardiologist. "It must be so difficult raising a child on your own without resources." "Alexandra is so brave," Victoria continued, clearly enjoying her role as the successful sister. "She's been struggling for years, but she refuses to ask for help. Too proud, you know." Patricia Reynolds, whose husband owned a chain of medical clinics, shook her head sympathetically. "I don't know how you manage. The cost of everything these days: groceries, utilities, rent. It must be terrifying living paycheck to paycheck." "She can barely afford groceries," Victoria announced dramatically, as if my supposed poverty was some kind of fascinating spectacle for their entertainment. "I keep offering to help, but she's so independent. Sometimes I wonder if Emma gets enough to eat." The group made appropriate cooing sounds of sympathy while looking at me like I was an exotic animal in a zoo. "Have you considered applying for assistance programs?" asked Jennifer Walsh, whose diamond earrings probably cost more than most people's annual salary. "There's no shame in accepting help when you're truly in need." "I manage," I said quietly, playing my role perfectly while internally marveling at their complete ignorance of reality. "Barely," Victoria corrected with a laugh. "You should see her apartment. It's smaller than my walk-in closet. And that car she drives." I keep telling her that image matters in the consulting business, but what can you do? The humiliation was public and thorough. Every woman at that table was looking at me with a mixture of pity and superiority, secure in their knowledge that they were witnessing a cautionary tale about the consequences of poor life choices. That's when my phone buzzed with a call from my assistant, Jennifer Martinez, who managed my actual life from a secure office in Manhattan. I normally would never answer business calls during family events, but something about the timing and the urgent nature of the call made me excuse myself and step outside. "Miss Sterling," Jennifer said, her voice tight with concern, "we have a situation. The Financial Times just published their annual list of the world's most influential private investors. Your name is on it." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. We have ironclad confidentiality agreements." Apparently, the European regulatory filing for the Blackstone acquisition couldn't be completely redacted. They connected enough dots to identify you as the founder of Sterling Dynamics. The article is titled "The Invisible Billionaire: How Alexandra Sterling Built a $2 billion Empire in Complete Secrecy." I looked back through the windows of the country club at my sister's charity luncheon, where women were probably still discussing my supposed inability to afford groceries. "How long before this goes mainstream?" I asked. "It's already happening," Jennifer replied. "Bloomberg picked it up 20 minutes ago. Forbes is calling for a statement. The Wall Street Journal wants an exclusive interview. Miss Sterling, your billionaire status is public. The secret is out." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. 15 years of carefully maintained anonymity had just evaporated in a single news cycle. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "The story includes details about your anonymous charitable donations. They've connected you to over $200 million in gifts to children's hospitals, educational programs, and disaster relief over the past decade." The irony was perfect. While I was inside being pitted for my supposed poverty, the financial world was discovering that the struggling single mother was actually one of the most successful investors of her generation. "I need you to prepare a statement," I told Jennifer. Something dignified that confirms the facts without giving away too many operational details. Already done, Miss Sterling. Should I release it? I looked back at the country club, where my sister was probably regaling her friends with more stories about my financial difficulties. Yes, I said. Release it now. I walked back into the luncheon to find Victoria's group exactly where I had left them, still dissecting my supposed failures with the enthusiasm of amateur sociologists. There she is. Victoria called out as I approached. We were just discussing how difficult it must be to maintain professional credibility when you can't afford proper business attire. The group laughed appreciatively at my expense, completely unaware that the financial world was simultaneously discovering that the woman they were mocking was worth more than all of their husbands' practices combined. Alexandra, Margaret Whitmore said with exaggerated concern, I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you considered that Emma might be better off with more stability? I don't mean to interfere, but children need security. She means a stable home environment, Patricia added helpfully. Consistent nutrition, educational opportunities, the things that require financial resources. Victoria nodded sagely. I've been thinking the same thing. Maybe Emma could spend more time with us, where she could see what a stable family looks like. The cruelty of suggesting that my daughter would be better off away from me because of my supposed poverty was the final straw. But before I could respond, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. Miss Sterling, came an unfamiliar voice when I answered. This is David Chen from Forbes magazine. We're updating our real-time billionaire rankings, and we need to confirm your current net worth for our breaking news story. The voice was loud enough in the quiet luncheon room that several people at nearby tables turned to look at me curiously. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I said, knowing full well that everyone in Victoria's group was now listening intently. Forbes magazine, Miss Sterling. We're updating our billionaire list based on the Financial Times revelation about Sterling Dynamics. Can you confirm that your current net worth is approximately $2.1 billion? The silence at our table was so complete that I could hear the sound of champagne glasses being set down at tables across the room. Victoria's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, and then something approaching horror as the implications began to sink in. I'll have my assistant send you a statement, I said professionally into the phone. Sterling Dynamics will not be commenting on specific asset valuations at this time. I hung up and looked around at the circle of women who had spent the past hour pitying me for my supposed inability to afford basic necessities. Alexandra, Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible, did that person just say, billionaire? Before I could answer, Margaret Whitmore's phone chimed with a news alert. She looked at the screen and her face went completely white. The invisible billionaire, she read aloud in a stunned voice. Alexandra Sterling, founder of Sterling Dynamics, revealed as one of America's most successful private equity investors with estimated net worth of $2.1 billion. The entire luncheon had gone quiet as other guests received similar news alerts and began connecting the dots between the breaking news story and the woman they'd been watching being humiliated for her supposed poverty. Patricia Reynolds was frantically scrolling through her phone. It says here that you've donated over $200 million to charity anonymously. $200 million, Alexandra. That's more than all of our husbands' practices are worth combined, Jennifer Walsh finished weakly. Victoria looked like she was about to faint. But you live in that tiny apartment. You drive that old car. You shop at Target. I choose to live simply, I said calmly. Wealth doesn't have to be displayed to be real. The country club dining room had erupted in excited whispers as news of my identity spread throughout the luncheon. Women who had been ignoring the poor sister were now staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment to desperate social calculation. Miss Sterling, came a voice from behind me. I turned to see the country club manager approaching with obvious nervousness. I wanted to personally welcome you to our establishment. If there's anything we can do to make your experience more comfortable. The same man who had looked right through me when I arrived was now practically bowing in deference to my newly revealed billionaire status. Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out as a desperate whisper. Alexandra, we didn't know. Why didn't you tell us? Tell you what, Victoria? I asked gently. That I was successful? Would it have changed how you treated me? Of course it would have, she said, then immediately realized how that sounded. Exactly, I replied. You treated me with condescension and pity because you thought I was poor. You suggested that Emma would be better off living with you because you assumed I couldn't provide for her. You made my supposed poverty into entertainment for your friends. Margaret Whitmore tried to interject. Alexandra, please understand, we were just concerned. You were concerned about appearing superior to someone you thought was beneath you, I corrected. For 15 years, my family has treated me like a charity case while I quietly built one of the most successful investment firms in history. Patricia Reynolds was still staring at her phone. It says here that Sterling Dynamics has generated returns of over 400% for its investors. You've revolutionized private equity investing. While living in a tiny apartment and shopping at Target, I added. Funny how success doesn't always look the way people expect it to. The luncheon had essentially stopped functioning as a social event. Every conversation in the room was now focused on the revelation that the woman they'd watched being mocked for her poverty was actually worth more than most small countries' GDP. Victoria made one desperate attempt at damage control. Alexandra, you have to understand, I was trying to help. I thought you were struggling. You thought I was failing, I corrected. And instead of offering genuine support or trying to understand my choices, you used my supposed failure to make yourself feel superior. You told your friends I could barely afford groceries while I was anonymously funding children's hospitals. The cruelty of the irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. While Victoria had been organizing charity luncheons to raise thousands of dollars, her poor sister had been quietly donating millions to causes that actually saved lives. Jennifer Walsh found her voice. The article mentions that you've been maintaining this lifestyle for 15 years. Living modestly while building a business empire. Why? Because I wanted to see who would love and support me when they thought I had nothing to offer, I said, looking directly at Victoria. It was an illuminating experiment. The results of that experiment were now on full display in a country club dining room where the woman they'd pitted was revealed to be more successful than any of them had ever dreamed of being. Over the following days, the story became international news. The invisible billionaire who had lived in anonymity for 15 years became a symbol of authentic success and the danger of judging people by appearances. Victoria called me constantly, leaving tearful voicemails apologizing for her treatment and begging for forgiveness. The other women from the luncheon sent flowers, cards, and invitations to events they'd never previously thought to include me in. But the most satisfying part wasn't their embarrassment or their desperate attempts at reconciliation. It was finally being able to provide Emma with the life she deserved without having to hide our resources. 2 weeks after the revelation, Emma and I moved into our actual home, a beautiful estate that I'd owned for years but never been able to live in while maintaining my cover. Emma's reaction to learning that her mother was a billionaire was priceless. Does this mean I can finally get the good art supplies for my portfolio? Victoria showed up at our new house a month later, driving through the gates with obvious awe at the property she'd never known her sister owned. Alexandra, she said when I opened the door, I need to apologize. Really apologize, not just damage control. I'm listening, I said, inviting her inside. I was cruel, she said simply. I made you into a project, a charity case that made me feel good about myself. I never tried to understand your choices or respect your decisions. I just assumed that because your life didn't look like mine, you must be failing. It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from her in 15 years. The worst part, she continued, is that while I was pitying you for shopping at Target, you were changing the world. Those anonymous donations, the children's hospital wing, the scholarship programs, the disaster relief, that was you, wasn't it? Some of it, I confirmed. All this time, I thought I was the successful sister because I could afford designer handbags and country club memberships. But you were actually successful in ways that matter. Victoria spent that afternoon learning about the real work I'd been doing for 15 years. The companies I'd saved, the innovations I'd funded, the lives I'd changed through strategic investments and charitable giving. I'm proud of you, she said as she was leaving. I should have been proud of you all along, regardless of what I thought your bank account looked like. 6 months later, Victoria has become one of my biggest supporters and advocates. She's learned to measure success by impact rather than appearance, and she's started asking better questions about the assumptions she makes about other people. But the most important lesson came from Emma, who handled the revelation of our wealth with remarkable maturity. "Mom," she said one evening as we sat in our actual living room instead of the tiny apartment we'd called home for so many years, "I'm glad you waited to tell me about the money. I think I needed to learn who I was before I learned who we could afford to be. The invisible billionaire experiment taught me everything I needed to know about family, loyalty, and the difference between genuine relationships and social transactions. Sometimes the most successful people are the ones you'd never suspect. And sometimes the person you're pitying for being unable to afford groceries is actually worth more than everyone at the charity luncheon combined." The universe has a sense of humor about assumptions like that.